Hello, I am Professor Kino, and welcome to my Office of Cinematic Antiquity. Today we will be talking about social media during the weeks leading up to this film's release was a shit show. From the Brie Larson controversy, to the Rotten Tomatoes controversy, to the review bombing, to the utilization of this film as a political movement for both the right and the left, I don't think I've ever seen a film that was so divisive and chaotic before its release, maybe ever. Ghostbusters 2016, I don't even recall that film being surrounded by so much mumbo-jumbo, but I'm not here to delve into the Captain Marvel controversy rat's nest. I'm here to review the film for what it is, a comic book movie. Yes, I will dip into all the razzmatazz a little near the end of this video, but it will not be my focus at all. So let's all just take a breather and look at Captain Marvel as a movie. So does it fit snugly into the massive Marvel Cinematic Universe franchise and introduce us to its newest hero in a glorious fashion, or is it the MCU's first real misstep? Premise. After the Kree law enforcer Veers is captured by the shape-shifting Skrulls, some memories of her missing past reveal themselves. After breaking free, she makes it her mission to discover who she was and who she is, and simultaneously end a long-raging intergalactic war. Writing. This film is first and foremost an origin story. The MCU is jam-packed full of them. Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, the Incredible Hulk, Guardians of the Galaxy, Black Panther, Ant-Man, Doctor Strange, etc. We've seen this type of hero's journey before. The protagonist starts one way, grows, matures, harnesses his or her power, learns to be a hero, defeats the enemy, and then looks toward the future hopefully and with determination. It's not new. However, Marvel keeps stepping up its origin story game by making each iteration of it unique enough to differentiate it from the pack. For example, Thor was a Shakespearean drama, Ant-Man was a heist film, Captain America was a World War II drama, etc., and Captain Marvel is no different in this respect. While it is a classic origin story, it is also a fish-out-of-water story with a female empowerment undertone and a non-linear narrative. As for the latter, it's not non-linear like Pulp Fiction, although the fact that this film takes place in 1995 and Pulp Fiction was in the 1995 Academy Awards for Best Picture is kind of fun. It is non-linear in that we come into our hero's origin in the middle and we learn a lot of what came before through creatively presented flashbacks. And while it did take me the first maybe 10 or 15 minutes to really get oriented with everything, the film does throw a lot at you from the start, I eventually got my footing and the film carried on at a solid pace until its conclusion, despite its non-linear structure. And on top of this, the film is able to stay rather captivating through a number of legitimately unexpected twists and turns, and they all work well and help to keep this classic MCU origin story feeling fresh, fun, and engaging from start to finish. And that's what this film is, a fun and engaging MCU sci-fi romp. It has space battles, aliens, amusing humor, fun nods to the greater MCU, and a really fleshed out villain. In the end, Captain Marvel is not a groundbreaking, earth-shattering entry into the franchise, particularly when compared to Infinity War, Civil War, etc., but it holds its own and is a satisfying adventure for anyone itching for an entertaining comic book film to tide them over until Avengers Endgame next month. Acting. A lot has already been said about Brie Larson's acting as Carol Danvers, aka Captain Marvel. People have said wooden, bland, dry, synonyms, etc., but to be honest, I don't see it much. There are scenes where she seems to be holding back, but to be honest, I think that was a creative choice on the director's part. There was a line in the beginning when Carol is training with her mentor Jan Rog, and he tells her that emotions are a weakness and that she needs to control them. And since a lot of the film is Carol struggling with her identity, i.e. trying to be herself, but also trying to be a good Kree soldier, Carol fluctuates between being sarcastically charming and stone-faced. So Larson's performance attempts to capture this. Maybe it doesn't work 100% of the time, but I actually liked it, and I am excited to see Larson's Captain Marvel interact with the rest of the heroes of the MCU. Next up is Samuel L. Jackson, who reprises his role as Nick Fury, albeit a younger version of him. Jackson is just as charming as he always is, but he is also able to make Fury more naive and less battle-worn. He is always great to see. And this is about the same takeaway that I had with Clark Gregg's return as Agent Coulson, equally charming. Then, for Ben Mendelsohn as Talos, the leader of the shape-shifting Skrulls, he is also really good here. Mendelsohn plays the typical villainous character that he has for the last handful of movies that he's been in, think Rogue One, Ready Player One, Robin Hood, etc., but he also has a few surprises up his sleeves that keep his shtick fresh and fun. He was great here. And the last major role I want to mention is Jude Law as Jan Rog. Well, when he was on screen, I was usually like, oh man, it's Jude Law, rather than being like, hey, it's Jan Rog. He is a reputable actor for a reason, and he brings a lot of good things to the character, and had plenty of fun stuff to work with. He was good. And as for the minor roles, they were all great as well, from Annette Bening as the Supreme Intelligence, to Lashana Lynch as Maria Rambeau, to Lee Pace as Ronan the Accuser, to Digimon Hanso as Korath. Everyone was good. Costumes, hair, and makeup. First and foremost, how does our new hero look? This is a comic book movie, and the look of our hero is one of the most important things, to be honest. And I'm happy to say that Captain Marvel looks great. Her uniform is simple and yet stylish. From its leather pilot jacket feel to its attractive color palette, first with its solid greens and silvers, then with its red, gold, and blue, to his really cool helmet that forms and retracts at will, Captain Marvel looks great, and best of all, is not over the top. And as for her makeup and hair, they are also very well done. While all of it does remain pristine throughout the film, despite the crap Captain Marvel is put through, there are moments when her hair does get messed up and her makeup does get smudged, such as when she falls through the roof of a blockbuster, that are nice touches. Even if a few edits later, everything is back to being perfect looking. And as for the Skrulls, they also looked great. While once in a blue moon things looked a little clunky, as if the actors were really feeling the restrictions in facial movement from all the prosthetics they had on them, they were still very well done. They looked like real aliens, and a lot of this had to do with the fact that the makeup actually hid the actors' identities. For instance, Ben Mendelsohn didn't really look like Ben Mendelsohn when he had the makeup on. It did a great job of making the Skrulls feel like their own unique characters, and this was only enhanced by their cool, scaly, purplish clothes. They looked good. And as for everyone else, they were also well put together, from the suits and ties for the special agents, to the occasional dyed blue skin and hair for the Kree, to Carol's grunge look while staying undercover on Earth. The costumes, hair, and makeup were top-notch in this film. Set design. There were a lot of unique sets here, so bear with me. First was that of Hala, the Kree homeworld. We don't get to see too much of it, but what was there looks a lot like a Guardians of the Galaxy set mixed with some Blade Runner. I thought it looked really neat, and hope we get to explore it more in future films. Next up was a planet that the Kree raid in order to flush out some Skrulls in the beginning. It had some cool terrain, but was a little too dark with a lack of structures that made it a little unmemorable. Not bad, just fine. Then for the Skrull ships, from what we see of them, which is mostly hallways to be honest, they look fine. They actually reminded me a lot of Zod's Kryptonian ship in Man of Steel, right down to the feel of the escape pods. And then finally for the general look of the 1990s Earth, wonderful. From the immaculate recreation of a blockbuster to the cars to the technology, etc., everything looked straight out of 1995, and while there were a lot of smaller sets, i.e. a government base, a bar, etc., I don't really find them worthwhile to break down individually. Except for one, actually, a file room in the government facility. It had motion sensor lights in it for each aisle of the room, and it was used to great effect during a tense action scene. Nick Fury was trying to sneak through it, and had to use the lights to figure out the positioning of the enemy agents. It was really creative, so in the end the sets were all solid with some particularly stellar standouts in the midst. Choreography. You have your typical Marvel punching and slamming, but with enough freshness to it all to make it captivating. From Captain Marvel's photon blasts, to dogfights, to cool alien tech, to shape-shifting Skrulls, to gunplay, the action here was on par quality-wise with most of the other MCU flicks, with a nice variety to it. It's not like Infinity War levels of wowee, but it was solid, fun, engaging, and well-crafted. Cinematography. There were a handful of really nice shots here. My favorites include the one of the Kree squad walking to their ships in slow-mo, the explosion of the spoiler that results in some fancy CGI, and one segment when Captain Marvel is surrounded by a bunch of her memories and she is forced to float around them, reminiscent of the Doctor Strange multiverse montage, just not nearly as trippy. However, not everything was dandy here. There were a few times when the lighting seemed a little off. It might have been the screen that I saw the film on, so maybe you will have a different takeaway here. It was never so bad that I couldn't see what was going on, but enough to be like, tis a bit dark. Additionally, some of the action was a little hectic and the framing made everything a tad disorienting. Again, it wasn't bad, but it also wasn't perfect. For instance, in one fight sequence that takes place on a Skrull ship in the beginning, the way it started was a little chaotic. Again, not bad, but it could have been a little better. Besides this, however, everything else was solidly done, so cinematography-wise, there were a handful of great parts and a couple of mediocre parts, but on average, it was solid. Editing. The editing featured here was mostly average, but with some outliers. As for the good outliers, the editing during the flashbacks was usually great. The snippets flowed together nicely in a creative way, going forwards and backwards and mixing together. Very cool stuff. On the other hand, however, the action could sometimes get a little choppy feeling. It was good, just not great. Sometimes you just see punches and kicks swinging around and people being thrown about and just kinda gotta roll with it. Again, this wasn't all the time, but was often enough to be noticeable. So just like with the cinematography, great parts and mediocre parts, but solid by and large. CGI. The most stellar part of the CGI here was the de-aging effect. Samuel L. Jackson was 70 years old now, but with the use of visual effects, he looks exactly like his mid-40s 1995 self throughout the whole runtime. And he has a lot of screen time to allow this effect to shine. It's fantastic. And the same goes for Clark Gregg's Coulson. His de-aging looks stupendous. As for the other effects, Captain Marvel's powers look amazing as well. Colorful, mesmerizing, wispy, and beautiful. There was also a lot of great CGI work done for the spaceships and alien world, such as the Kree homeworld of Allah. However, there are a few times when the CGI does look a little obvious, namely with Goose the Cat. It's not bad, but just a step down from the film's typical excellence. So it's a great looking film CGI-wise, with a few mediocre outliers. Music. This film has a great 90s soundtrack. It's wonderful. While the songs aren't as well implemented as in the Guardians films, they fit nicely and I enjoyed hearing them. And as for the original music, it was your classic MCU fare with wild orchestral pieces intermixed with more soft emotional ones and cool trippy sci-fi ones. The music was solid on all fronts. Direction. Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck helmed this film as the latest indie filmmakers turned MCU directors, and they did a solid job. This film had to check a lot of boxes: introduce Captain Marvel, tie into the greater MCU, finish setting up Avengers Endgame, be the first female-led MCU film, and still be an entertaining ride in its own right. And Boden and Fleck succeeded. Captain Marvel is a fun comic book film that introduces us to a new hero in a solid fashion. Is it as groundbreaking as Infinity War or anything? No, but it is never going to be. It's not what this film needed to be. It's just a fun addition to the MCU that has some great costumes, hair and makeup, great CGI, entertaining action, an engaging story, and a great 90s production design with a great soundtrack to go along with it. My enjoyment. I enjoyed this one thoroughly. Is it one of my favorite MCU films? No. Is it one of my least favorite? Also no. It's just a good comic book origin film that fleshes out the universe even more, introduces us to a fun new hero, and is an enjoyable time through and through. It both fulfilled my need for another MCU flick and pumped me for Endgame, and I'm excited to see what they do with Captain Marvel in the future. Recommendations. If you are interested in a solid comic book adventure, this will fulfill that requirement. It's well crafted, entertaining, and imaginative. It also has a solid female empowerment message to it that, if that's something you think has been missing from MCU films, will please you. However, if you are sick of the whole MCU formula or getting fatigued by comic book films in general, Captain Marvel probably won't do anything to change that. While it does a good job at freshening up the whole origin story, it doesn't really break the wheel in that regard. And with that in mind, since the movie itself is not too holy cow, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, I doubt it'll be able to change any preconceived notions that you have going into the film. So regarding the whole controversy crap, if you want to see an overarching nebulous SJW conspiracy at this film's core, you probably will. Now, while I could jump into my thoughts of the origins of this controversy and why Captain Marvel was targeted and whether I agree with it or not, I'd rather not kick that hornet's nest. So let me just end by reiterating, this film is not for those tired of the tried and true MCU origin story formula or is fatigued by comic book movies in general, but is definitely for anyone just looking for a fun MCU adventure to tide them over till Endgame. Thanks for watching, I hope you liked it. If you did, leave a like. If you want to add anything, feel free to leave a comment. If you want to see more, please subscribe. I'm Professor Kino, and I look forward to our next discussion.